On August 29th, the Supreme Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit ruled in a 7-4 decision that most of Trump's sweeping tariffs, including those labeled as reciprocal and trafficking related, were illegal. And the ruling stated that the International Emergency Economic Power Act, the IEEPA, does not grant the president authority to impose with such tariff without clear congressional authorization. Today's live is extremely important, and I will tell you why it's important. Because first of all, the courts have said that the tariffs are illegal. 2, now those tariffs need to go to the Supreme Court. Okay. 3, if those tariffs are stricken down, we got ourselves a situation. Okay. What do we have? Well, essentially what we're saying is that the courts are basically saying the tariffs are illegal. Correct. So what I want to demonstrate to you is what are going to be the impact. What is going to be the likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to strike down? What's going to happen to the, what happens if they say no? What about the refunds? What about the stock market impact? What about the impact on the federal debt? What about the strategy going forward? What is the likelihood that they're going to strike those tariffs? So what we're looking at here is a very difficult situation. So what are the latest development? That is what is key. On August 29th, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Court, on August 29th, 2025, the U.S. Court of Appeal for the Federal Circuit ruled in a 7-4 decision, 7-4 decisions, that most of Trump's sweeping tariffs, including those labeled as authority to impose, including those labeled as reciprocal, were illegal. The Court of Appeal says that the tariffs are illegal. That's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage because they're saying they are illegal. You should have never done all the tariffs that you've done. Now, of course, this is becoming a thing because the whole process has started. Money has been collected. Deals have been made. Friendships have been broken. And the Court of Appeal and the Court of Appeal has a 7-4 decision have said this is, you can't do that. This is not legal. The ruling state that the International Emergency Economic Power Act, which is what the administration used to do the things that they're doing, does not grant the president authority to impose such tariffs. It is illegal. It's illegal. You should have never done it. You should have never collected all that money. What are you doing? That is very important because this is going to have to impact the stock market. It's going to impact the debt, the national debt. So what are we saying? You did not have the right to impose such tariff without clear congressional authorization, which would have been. Now, the reason it was done that way because it would take forever. I mean, if you have to remember, it took 3 years to do the NAFTA deal and the North American Trade Agreement and all these. The U.S. does not have that kind of time. And that's the reason why it was done the way it was done. But now the Court of Appeal is saying, nope, can't do that. Despite this ruling, though, the court issued a temporary stay saying allowing the tariffs to remain in effect. That's a good thing. Until at least October 14, 2025, to give the administration time to appeal to the Supreme Court. It is now going to the Supreme Court. This is I want my subscribers and my members to understand that this is very important. It is very important because now the Supreme Court needs to decide. And be careful, this is becoming serious. Because what if they say, you know what? It's illegal. You know what you have to do, right? You have to give the money back. Okay? The immediate legal challenge stemmed from the selection. Basically, there was a group that decided to sue it, because that's how it starts usually, where small importers in several states contested the executive use of that Power Act, which is basically the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And the Court of International Trade has initially ruled on May 25 that it was illegal, but then they moved it to the lower court, and now that decision was stayed pending appeal. So in parallel, Congress introduced the Trade Review Act of 2025. The point is that now they're coming after. They've been taking a while to get their act together. Now they're going after the tariffs. Now, the thing is, this has a huge amount of implication if it doesn't work out in the end. So let's be careful here. What am I saying? Well, what is the likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to say no? Now, you need to understand that the Supreme Court, right? The Supreme Court essentially is made up mostly of Republican elected Supreme Court judges. Okay, so these judges mostly were basically came from the Republicans, and we should be okay because they all from the Republican Party. They all three of them actually were brought in by Trump that said, I want these people. And you would say, well, then the three of them are from Trump, basically were appointed by Trump, and another three from other Republicans. So you would think that they would lean towards what Trump wants. So, what is the likelihood that these people are going to say that it is illegal? Do you think they're going to do it? Well, I have bad news for you. Because even though they are mostly leaning to the right and have been appointed by Republicans, and three of them actually by Trump himself, the concern is that this could be, the likelihood is very high. The likelihood is high that the Supreme Court will rule against the bulk of these tariffs. Based on legal precedent, if you look at what they've done in the past, it is very likely that they're going to say that it is indeed illegal. And that's a problem. Why am I saying that? Well, the Federal Circuit ruled 7-4 against it. Okay? And that decision is grounded on the major question doctrine, meaning that if a president takes sweeping economic actions, Congress must have clearly delegated the power. And this doctrine has strong support among the court conservative majority. The Supreme Court legal trends recently, the court's 6-3 conservative majority has consistently limited broad executive or agency actions without explicit congressional approval. For example, there was a case in 2022 of West Virginia versus EPA. They curbed the EPA Climate Authority under the major questions doctrine. The student loan forgiveness. Remember when Biden, and he wanted to basically, I'm going to forgive all these student loans. Struck it down. They say Biden's loan plan for lack of clear congressional authority. You can't do that. You're not a king. You can't do that. But the same logic, it is likely that they would find the IEEPA, which is what Trump used to, the government used to basically impose those tariffs, does not authorize tariffs on nearly all imports without congressional approval. So it is very likely that's not going to happen. The likelihood, 70 to 80% of the Supreme Court strike down the IEEPA tariffs. Low likelihood that the court saves them unless it accepts a broad reading of emergency authority. You say you don't have that authority, and it's probably going to be struck down. And that's a problem. Well, it's a problem because, frankly, you need to give the money back. You're going to need to give the money back. How much money we're talking about? Well, let me show you. Let me show you how much money we're talking about. We are talking for the U.S. to give back between 75 and 120 billion needs to be given back to the European, to the Chinese. You know, how embarrassing that's going to be. And how much money do you get to keep? Because not everything is applicable. You get to keep $9 to $15 billion not going to be refunded. And that's a problem, right? That's not enough, right? We need to be able to keep some of the money. You're only going to keep 15 to 20 billion. Okay, so that's going to be a lot of damage. Okay, so what's going to be the impact? What's going to be the impact? They said, no, you can't do it. You got to give the money back. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to need to refund the money. You know, we're talking, essentially, there's about $47 billion that has been collected already in the books. Right? The U.S. Customs said that $47 billion was collected between January 20th and May 30th. This is so embarrassing. From 22 presidential tariff action at issue in the lawsuits. Obviously, as we're talking right now, more money is coming in. So by October 14th, which is exactly when this is supposed to end, we're talking tariff collection accelerated in June and August. By June, tariff revenue we're going to be around $93 billion. If the IEPA was trading near the 50% implied to the $46 billion, we're talking between 75 to 120 billion. That's already coming into the Treasury, directly in the Treasury, which was a fantastic thing. You got to give all the money back. What would they likely keep? Well, they're going to keep those tariffs that are not touched by the ruling, which is Section 232, like the steel tariffs, the aluminum tariffs. The Chinese tariffs, right, would remain in Treasury. The appeal court ruling targets only the IEEPA. I want you to understand that. That's what that's what the tariffs are ruling on right now. That's what they're targeting. So for scale, the Treasury reporting custom receiving in the spring to summer 2025, there were $113 billion. That's money that's going to need to be refunded. And the officials are saying, well, we were looking at $300 billion to be collected. This is a real thing. This is a real thing. So the refund exposure, $47 billion already in, between 75 and $100 billion we're going to need to be refunded. Give the money back. Give the money back right now. So, okay, what's going to happen to the stock market then? This is going to be a problem because of in a recent tweet, the president says this is going to be 1929 if you guys don't approve this. And remember what happened in 1929. I don't have to tell you what happened in 1929. Some bad things happened in 1929. And of course, the stock market is going to do what? Well, actually, you may like this part because overall, it could be positive for equities in general because markets usually cheers tariff reductions because they lower the import costs, right? It reduces the probability of inflations. This could be a stimulus, removing an artificial tax burden because eventually, I don't know if you've seen it, but the costs have started to permeate through the system. I mean, I know from a personal point of view, when I was ordering my coffee last year for a little bit Nespresso coffee, it was like $1.15, and now it's $1.45. It is almost a 17% increase. So prices are going through. I'm sure some of you have seen what the meat costs have been imported. I mean, everything is coming through. Now, does it mean it's the end of the world because of those tariffs and inflation? No. I mean, don't forget, I want to remind everyone, first of all, that the amount of money that is coming in and this impact that you're seeing is impacting the industrial side of the GDP of the US, not 100%, which is about 20%. Okay. And in fact, those companies themselves, as part of the stock market, industrial companies, like the Ford and the GM and people actually make the stuff, because they, Ford doesn't make everything here. They got to import the stuff from overseas, so they're paying tariffs on that. And in fact, GM took a huge billion-dollar hit because they it's costing money to import the steel and import all these things. So what's happening right now is they are taking the hit on their income statement, and they have not passed all of the costs, but the costs are slowly coming in, very gently, very surely, but very definitely. Again, we're talking 20% of the economy here, okay? So, but the point is that's in danger, because you've been collecting money and you have to give it back. We'll know by October 14th, but more likely than not, the Supreme Court is going to say, no, that's illegal. So who's going to win? Well, if essentially the sector's winners are going to be retail, consumer goods, so watch your portfolio. Walmart, Target, Nike, all these people are going to enjoy this, because lower input cost, it's going to boost their profit margin. Automakers, they're going to be so relieved, because all the stuff that's been coming from overseas, the steel, the aluminum. I mean, Ford is a big importer of aluminum. They're going to have to pay a lot of money. The techs and electronics, Apple, Dell, HP, lower costs on all these. The losers are going to be obviously the domestic manufacturers of steel and aluminum. U.S. Steel, Alcoa. Some U.S. manufacturers, machinery, heavy equipment like Caterpillar. Companies lobbying for tariffs protection. Now, you're going to have lower inflation expectation. So overall, that should be good for the stock market. But, so that's a good thing? Not quite. The thing is, what about the geopolitical fallout? What are they going to say when they see that? Well, the geopolitical fallout of the Supreme Court striking down most of those tariffs would be big, would be huge, would be large, because those tariffs were central to the U.S. leverage in trade disputes. They were using the tariff to say, make America great again and bring everything back home. Now they're going to say, well, hold on. First of all, you got to give my money back. So now, I don't have to really deal with you, because you don't have the power to do the things that you said you had. This is important. This is going to have a huge implication. So U.S. trade leverage weakens. Many countries, EU, India, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Canada, China, they're facing huge reciprocal and baseline tariffs. If they vanish, the U.S. loses a bargaining chip. It's over. You don't have that over them anymore. It signaled that the U.S. presidential power is constrained by the courts. No one to get mad at, because you don't have the power to do all the things that you thought you did. Shifting leverage back to the legislature, Congress, and foreign parliaments. 2, foreign relation, relief and uncertainty. Well, because Europe and Asia likely to become the ruling. It removes friction and could ease tension with the World Trade Organization. Mexico and Canada, huge winners. Why? Because since tariffs tied to trafficking, that's not enough. You can't just say, because you're trafficking whatever it is over the border, I'm going to give you tariffs of 50%. No, you can't do that. They would fall away. China, it would be mixed, because, and I'll explain to you later, but some of the tariffs are going to remain. So 3, impact on alliances. Allies frustrated by the tariffs moves, especially in Europe, would see this as a judicial check on America unpredictability, because that's the thing. Has the Supreme Court says no, the government says yes, they're going to say, well, that's great, but then it's going to make America extremely unpredictable. So So who are we listening to? Because it was tough enough to understand, the tariffs themselves. Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Now we're saying, is it yes? Is it no? Is it what is it? What are we? Who are we talking to? Who should we be talking to? Because we're obviously talking to the wrong person. So it would impact the alliances. The allies, frustrated by the U.S. tariffs move, especially, it would be a judicial check on American predictability, unpredictable. It could improve NATO and EU relations, but the allies might also worry. Of course, are restraining the president. Is the U.S. trade policy reliable at all? And that's why there's a threat of you're going to create mass confusion if you say no to me. Across the board. 4, China and strategic rival. China may see a short-term win, but also recognize that the U.S. can still use targeted tariffs. And we'll talk about Section 302 and 232 because I believe the government knows this already. And in fact, they already shifted focus to a different type of tariffs. Those tariffs are not impacted. That's going to create even more instability because he's going to say, "Oh, I can't use the emergency tariffs. I'm going to use Section 301 and 232. Then I'm going to shift to another sort of tariffs." Now you may need not the courts declared Trump illegal. Now it heads to the Supreme Court. That is correct, Ali. That's exactly what we're talking about. It is going to the Supreme Court, and the point that I'm making is that the Supreme Court is going to say that is correct. It is illegal. No, it's not so much, and don't forget, the Supreme Court is 6 versus 3. 6 Republicans, well, not Republicans, but appointed by the Republicans, and 3 are appointed by the Democrats. In fact, 3 out of the 6 were appointed by Trump himself. So technically, the tariffs are technically the Supreme Court is mostly on the right. But based on what they've done in the past, they are likely to curb those current tariffs. Well, look what they did with Biden. I don't know if you remember, but the previous government wanted to essentially forgive all those student loans. I don't know if you remember that. And the Supreme Court said, whoa, no, you can't do that. That's not within your power to do. And that's basically what they're saying to the current one, right? They're basically saying, no, that's not going to work. And I will show you. And the reason why the likelihood is high because the court is conservative majority has consistently limited broad executive or agency action without broad executive, meaning let's forgive all of the student loans. No, you can't do that. Let's tariffs everyone, 130 countries because of emergency. It's a big emergency. So we're tariffing everyone. No, and the courts have basically, when I say the court, the Supreme Court, right? They have ruled against it without explicit congressional approval. You need Congress to approve all of them. It would take forever. And you could understand why the government wanted to do it because they say, guys, I mean, if you want me to do the things that you want me to do, I can't spend 3 years per deal, right? I mean, it took 3 years to do the Canadian, Mexican, U.S. trade agreement. How many years is it going to take me to deal with Europe and China and and India, right? I don't have the time. The U.S. is losing ground, and that's true. The U.S. is a ticking. The ability for the U.S. to compete internationally is slowly diminishing. Most of the pharmaceutical items come from China. I don't have to go through this story all over again, but basically, the U.S. is not producing much of anything that is of significant importance to the U.S. anymore. The weapons, the pharmaceutical, the semiconductors. We're talking pharmaceutical item. The 100% of the antibiotics being produced used in the U.S. comes from China. So that's over. You can't do it. Now, of course, you know what? What's a big deal? Just it's okay. I mean, as long as they give it to us, then it's not a problem. Well, what if they stop giving it to you? What are you going to do about it? Right? Because that's what's happening right now with the rare earth mineral. China is saying, "Whoa, hold on! I'm not giving you as much as I'm going to give it to you in the past. That's not going to happen. I don't want to do that." And the reason I don't want to do that is because, I want something in return. You have to start giving me something in return. So that's what's happening. And frankly, the concern is that, China and these countries are, quite frankly, getting very close, right? India and China are getting close. Russia, and in fact, right this week, there's this huge meeting in China where India and Russia are going to be there. I don't know if Russia, I know definitely India is going to be there. Modi is going to be there. So these people are getting together. Now, of course, the story that is being told is that because of the tariffs, now they're going to get together. No, they've started that way before. They've been together not together, but they're minded ties for starting in 2020, at the end of 2024, India and China have gotten closer. They've removed flights. They removed visa requirements. They've calmed the border interaction that they had. So very slowly, that little music is coming, meaning that the U.S. is producing less and less and less of its industrial needs. And China and India are getting closer, and Russia as well. And that's the urgency of the tariffs. Now, obviously, maybe a little bit too fast because it can't be done. The Supreme Court, for example, West Virginia versus the EPA in 2022, they curbed the EPA Climate Authority under the Major Questions Doctrine. Student loan origination forgiveness from 2023. That's what I was talking about, the one that happened with Biden. Struck down Biden's loan plan for lack of clear congressional authority. For the same logic, it is likely that they would find the IEEPA, which is this tariff that Trump has been using, does not authorize tariffs on nearly all imports. Okay. Without congressional approval. So China is going to be a big issue. And the U.S. is running out of time. So therefore, that's what's happening. So from a geopolitical point of view, that's going to be a lot of damage. Striking down the tariffs could restore credibility to the U.S. as a World Trade Organization member. That's a good thing. Now, forget about the domestic political fallout if the Supreme Court says, no, it is not legal. Trump and his GOP allies would frame this as, obviously, and he's already saying it, is judicial sabotage of U.S. sovereignty. Basically, they're saying this is the decks are stacked against us. This is wrong. This is what they're doing. Well, the Democrats would argue it restores constitutional balance and prevents trade wars that backfire on consumers. And the bottom line is the allies are going to be relieved. The rivals are going to see opportunities. They're going to say, what a big waste of time. And the U.S. credibility is going to shift, not to the president, but to the courts. But, and there is a but, the impact on the debt. And this is, this channel is all about looking for this channel is all about looking for black swan, and this is a potentially big black swan. A black swan is something that are going to impact us, our lives, going to impact the stock market. In this particular instance, the stock market should be okay, but the debt is going to be a problem. And remember, we only have crisis not when the stock market collapses. because it collapses because there's no liquidity in the market. And usually it's the credit side of things. Whenever you have when there's no liquidity, when there's no cash, there's nothing even the stock market, right? So what do you think happens if they say no, this is illegal? What do you think is going to happen to the US federal debt? It's very meaningful. It's going to impact the federal debt in a meaningful way because these tariffs are major revenue streams, right? Let me give you 5 points on that, which is important. The tariffs function like a tax. Money goes straight into the U.S. Treasury. Doesn't matter who pays them. I mean, it could be you ultimately, it could be the importer, it could be Ford, but it's a tax. In 2025, collection from the IAPEA tariffs alone, they're on track on track to get between $75 and $120 billion over a full year. This could be between $150 to $200 billion. This is real money. Right? That entire flow disappears. I mean, imagine, cutting a chunk out of custom duties. What do you think they do with that money? Right? The agencies that rate the U.S. debt are looking at this money. Oh, so you're collecting another tax. That's great. We want tax coming in so you could pay your debt and fix your debt problem. In 2025, the U.S. deficit is already projected to be 1.5 to 1.8 trillion. That is the money, essentially, that much money the U.S. makes through the tariffs and through the taxes and whatever, and versus how much they spent. They have a deficit already of $1.8 trillion, losing money right there. Now, losing an additional 150 to 200 billion out of the 1.5 to 1.8 could widen the deficit by another 1% of GDP. So now your deficit goes back up. This means higher borrowing needs. Now we need more money, right? We need to issue more debt to make up that loss. What do you think the bond market is going to do? The bond market, investors were waiting the tariffs roll back, inflation benefits, so inflation is going to be probably rolling down. What about the fiscal hit? You guys can't pay your debts anymore. You don't have that $200 billion that you thought you were going to get. It's gone. You got to give it back to Europe and China and Mexico and all these people. So low inflation will reduce the bond yield, but higher deficits and debt issuance could push yields higher over time. Why? Because now the U.S. is becoming riskier. If it's riskier, I need to charge more interest. If I need to charge more interest on $37 trillion, that's going to make things even worse. You could have a debt crisis on your hands here. Forget the political fallout. Opponents will say strike down tariffs blows a hole in the budget. The proponents will say tariffs are inefficient tax. So you're going to have the fight back and forth. And this is happening right before the midterm election in 2026. This is going to be a lot of damage. It's going to be a humongous amount of damage next year. So debt rises faster if the tariffs fall. And therefore, we have a fiscal trade-off, more consumer relief versus weaker treasury cash flow. Now, of course, at the end of the day, we have more debt. Was this a problem before? Not really. So I don't think it's going to be depends how the market reacts and how yields go, right? You have to look at the 10-year yield. But at the end of the day, what could end up happening is that as you're refunding the money because of the Supreme Court, then what could end up happening is that we just issue more debt, right? Let's issue more debt. Or how are you going to pay the debt? Let's issue more dollars. We've been doing it for a long time, so what's the big difference? Let's just keep issuing more debt and more dollars. So that's going to be muted. So I'm not too concerned about the debt either, not too concerned about the stock market. What I am concerned about is the fact that from a geopolitical point of view, that's going to make it, you're back to square one, basically. Yeah, you're back to, oh my God, so now I got to, but, and there's a but. The administration, I think, knows that already. And that's why you need to look. We're playing chess here. We're not playing We're not playing, pinnacles, right? We're playing chess. What they're doing, they're already shifting. In fact, the U.S. is already shifting its focus towards targeted, legally grounded tariffs under Section 232 and Section 301. I mean, you got to be specific now, because now we know, and I'm sure they know. If I have an idea, I'm pretty sure that they know what's going to happen, even though they're all Republicans. They're not. There's too much. The power is too much. It's too grand. They're not going to allow it. So basically, they're going to bump up Section 232 actions. What does that mean? Well, the administration is going to expand its steel and aluminum tariffs under Section 232. Remember, one thing you could say about this particular administration, they do not give up. Look what they did with Lisa Cook, right? I mean, they picked up something that happened before she was. Lisa Cook, by the way, is the Fed governor that they want out. And in fact, she got a letter. She was fired, believe it or not. And what they found out about her is, the fact that she lied on a credit application, on a mortgage application, on the mortgage documents. She's saying, "Yeah, I live in this house. Yeah, I live in this other house too. You live in both houses?" And one of them is actually rented. Anyway, the point is, and that was before she was a Fed governor. They want lower rates. So first they went after Powell, and now they're going after all of these governors. And frankly, one of the governors couldn't take it, left, replaced by another governor. So when she leaves, because she will leave, the pressure is too great. You're going to have 4 governors on the right side of Trump, and then you're going to have 3 on the other side saying, "I want higher rates." The point is, in fact, the Powell already said that you know what? Let's not focus too much on inflation. Let's start focusing more on the employment, and that's a little bit weak. So we're going to lower the rates. Pressure is tremendous. Pressure that you do not actually realize yourself. Right? These people are every day. And that woman said, "No, this is just wrong." Lisa Cook said, "I'm going to sue the government." And the court said, "Well, hold on. I mean, okay, fine, but we cannot prevent him from doing what he's doing. So let's talk about it." She's going to have to go. Okay. So the government basically doesn't give up at the end of the day. It does not give up. Now, having said that, was she in her right? I mean, at the end of the day, she... That was before that was before. And we know why this is being done. This is being done because you want the lower rate. So you're literally going after, in a very coercive kind of way, after the member of the Federal Reserve. Now, having said that, the Federal Reserve, is it like this perfect body? Not really, because they missed the 2008 financial crisis. They were supposed to lower rates a lot faster in 2021 than they did. They admitted themselves they made a mistake. So this is not like an august body that they basically know everything and they make no mistakes. Okay, but the point is, this is a very, this is the start of this government. They're really going after it, and they're not going to give up. So what are they doing now? They're shifting to other tariffs. It's amazing. It's amazing what they're doing. They don't give up. I guess people should not give up. And basically, they're going after Section 232 and Section 301. And basically, what this means is that they're going to expand the scope and targeting strategic industries for national security reasons. And they're going to maintain leverage over China trade issues, excluding and managing specific goods. Now, the one about the national security reasons is the one I've been telling you about. We need to make more semiconductors in the U.S. We need to make our own medicine, our own antibiotics. No? What's wrong with that? We need to make it here. We can't get it from China or India. That's the reason why I'm doing it. Well, for that, the court has said, okay, fine, that's okay, at least for now. We're dealing with the other one, the emergency one, when you were saying that there was fentanyl coming overboard and emergency. There's no emergency for you. You cannot manage that emergency the way you're doing it right now, but for security reasons that you could do. And the U.S. is already doing that. Why do you think they have gone after Intel, right? Don't forget, we're playing chess here, right? And I want you to start thinking in those terms. We're playing 2 to 3 to 4, 5 steps ahead because we know what's going to happen. We know that the Supreme Court is going to say no. So what we're going to do is we are going to tend to take a 10% stake in Intel. It was supposed to be at some point the place to make the semiconductors. We are going to potentially take over a stake also in some of the defense companies in the U.S. We're going to take a stake in some of the companies, they've done it already, that are making rare earth mineral in the U.S. We're going to tax China for that reason. We are going to be doing a lot of things. Okay? That's what we want to do. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to find legal context. Okay? And yes, Ali, Trump should not let China produce small, cheap items while America focuses on expensive selling items. That's what's happening right now. They are very concerned that they're losing that issue. And everyone else is getting quite close together. So the administration is moving on the other side. And that is going to be problematic at some point because if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Okay. So at the end of the day, the strategy is already shifting. Okay. They are going after anything that is defense related, anything that's going to be semiconductors, anything having to, remember the people say it was kind of, strongly worded letters. Remember the strongly worded letters for the pharmaceutical companies? That is what it's about. The money that they want Taiwan Semiconductors and they want Taiwan to spend in the U.S. Don't spend $100 billion. I want you to spend $400 billion in the U.S. So they are shifting already because they know that the Supreme Court is going to say no. Of course, it's going to be very embarrassing because now you got to give all the money back. But at the end of the day, the market is going to recover. And that's good for you because, everyone is concerned that, it's going to be the end of the world because of, no, I mean, people are going to do what I'm doing now. They're going to start analyzing, they're going to start to understanding, and they're going to realize, you know what, it's not going to be as bad as we think. Plus, you know what, the administration is moving already, is shifting gear already. Okay. So the thing is you have to give the money back. I mean, the Supreme Court says no. They say no, so all that money needs to shift back. It will have impact on the market, on the debt. But you need to understand why the U.S. is doing what it's doing as well. They're not, of course, they're collecting money. I mean, the way I think Pete Navarro and these people thought, they said, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to tax them. You say, well, but hold on. I mean, do you think that it's going to pass the muster? Well, if we move fast enough and broadly enough, maybe they're going to try to put pressure on the Supreme Court. I mean, if you look at what's being said, it's being said that if this is not approved, this is going to be a huge crash. It's going to be 1929. It's going to be horrible. You have to say yes. If you look at what they've said in the past, they should say no because they do not want such broad power authority. Now, just as a reminder, in terms of the recent development, August 29, the U.S. Court of Appeal, this is a step before the Supreme Court, in a federal circuit ruled 7-4 that most of Trump's sweeping tariffs, including those labeled as reciprocal and trafficking related, were illegal. Can't do it. The rule stated that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which that's what the current government used, does not grant the president authority to impose such tariff without clear congressional authority. You should have gone to Congress. The thing is, I can't go to Congress. It's going to take forever. I got an emergency. Remember, in the next 5 to 7 years, the U.S. is probably going to lose that race on the semiconductors, and you need that for everywhere. And that's a problem. You need, the U.S. is dependent on a lot of countries for all of these things. And you could argue with the fact that, well, maybe you could be a bit nicer with these other countries because, of course, they say, well, you're pushing them in each other's arms. Well, you know what? I think that they're already in each other's arms right now. Okay, they're already there because right now Modi and China are meeting. They have these big meetings going on right now, and they've been getting quite close, quite frankly. China in 2024, they basically done away with a lot of the problems that they had. 2024, not now. Remember, we're playing chess here. They're playing 4, 5, 6 steps ahead. So since 2024, they said, well, maybe we should stop fighting. Because they were always fighting because of borders. Let me show you what I mean by the border, because that is quite interesting, right? So if you look at this, you could see the border between China and India. They're next to each other, right? And they were having fighting at the borders all the time. So the border, that fighting, they stopped the fighting. In fact, they were for the longest time they couldn't travel. And somehow in 2024, before the tariffs, they start doing away with all that. And they say, well, maybe we should remove the visa, do some more relationship between the two countries. Let's start talking more. Again, before the tariffs, okay? This is not happening because of tariffs. This was going on before. And what do you think? The people at the administration saw it, said, listen, they're getting way too close. We're losing ground. They're getting close. What are we going to do? And that's a problem, because if you don't do anything, we are going to end up by ourselves without nothing to buy and no pharmaceutical money. We need to do something. And this is what's been happening very slowly. So we need to act right now. But these countries were already doing it way before. China and Russia are already doing cross-border. They were actually doing war games in the China Sea. So all this has been happening very slowly, very quietly, but it's been happening, and they've been meeting, and now they're gonna have. Remember BRICS? All this is happening. So from a structural point of view, what the U.S. is trying to do is I'm trying to get in the middle of this using the tariffs, because it's the only way short of invading the countries, that's the only way for me to do it right now. And frankly, it needs to happen. It needs to happen. Otherwise, what are we going to do? U.S. rare earth mineral, China has a dominant position in supply, and I think they have like 80% of all the rare earth mineral. Take, for example, what China is doing with Russia. Key military exercise and development. And this is, again, April 2025. Now, of course, that takes time to plan, right? So in April, China launched a major military exercise around Taiwan. Okay. They did some naval drills. They've done they did in the China Sea in 2025 in August. They did, the Chinese and the Russian launch a joint Sea 2025. That's what it's called, a joint naval exercise in the Sea of Japan in the Sea of Japan, and the drills included submarine rescue, anti-submarine warfare, air defense. The Chinese and the Russian together, they are coordinating, demonstrating deeper military cooperation. I know that. They know that too. The government sees that and they say, what are you going to do about this? Right? Late February, early March, a Chinese task group conducted live drills in the Tasman Sea. Okay, that's a lot of activities that they're doing militarily, and they are combining their forces. They're getting closer and closer together. Now, the U.S., China relies on the U.S. for basically the consumer. And that's what they have, and that's what the U.S. is saying. No, you're not going to get my consumer. I want your rare earth mineral. I'm not going to give you the rare earth mineral at this point. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give you some of the rare earth mineral, but I think we need to negotiate. And the U.S. keeps on negotiating, and there was a 90-day reprieve on the negotiation, but nothing has happened since then. So that's going to take a lot of damage for the time being, and frankly, how long is that going to last? Well, in the meantime, the U.S. is moving. The U.S. the China and India right now. They're meeting. They're gonna have some discussions. So all of this is happening while the U.S. is trying to combine forces, trying to do something. What are we going to do to stop these people from getting together? The U.S. Think of it this way, right? 50% of printed circuit board comes from China. All of the Apple iPhones assembled in China. Computer chips, heavy dependence on China. Lithium battery, 80% global capacity. Pharmaceutical, right? Here's some numbers for you. 70% of the API, which is active pharmaceutical ingredients, come from China. 100%, nearly 100% antibiotics come from China. Okay. LR Bank says that, we don't have the strategic minds in place right now to present an offense. What do you think about that? Well, that's what the current administration is doing. If you look at it, basically you're in the courtyard and a bunch of people are getting together in the corner and they're talking, and you're like, hey, what about me? Rare earth minerals, 70 to 80% comes from China. The process REI, we may know what it is, which is the magnets, nearly total monopoly. Why can't we do our own rare earth minerals? And by the way, rare earth mineral is not rare. It's just that it takes 15 to 20 years to develop. Plus, it's very, very messy, very polluting. But China say, I'll do it. And now they have control over. Solar panel, 80 to 90% of global output. EV battery, dominant producer. You can't do without China, and they know it. This was an attempt to get in the middle of that. But now, with the Supreme Court's going to say no, everything has to go back to square one. But the administration is not giving up. They are going to say, okay, so I can't do that, right? Nope, you're not allowed to use the emergency. Well, then I'm shifting to a strategic shift, and I'm going to go after Section 232 and 301 because I do not give up. And basically, what is the difference between Section 232, 301, and the IEEPA, which has been using? Well, basically, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Got to know these things. The purpose is national security. Wow. Should have said that in the first place. Right? Lets the president impose tariffs if the Commerce Department finds imports threaten U.S. national security. Typical use: steel, aluminum. Can apply to others like semiconductors, rare earth. The only problem with rare earth is even if you put 100% rare earth tariffs, where are you going to get it from? You can't just start digging in your background. It's going to take years before you get this thing going. It's going to take years. Then you have the Section 301. The controversy about this one, the legal strength on this one is very strong because Congress explicitly delegated this power. And basically Congress said, listen, we don't have time to talk. If you feel somehow an emergency, we have to have the steel in this country because we were trying to build ships for war and we can't get it and we have to do something. So they say, okay, fine, you could use that for that. It's a very broad definition of national security. Critics says it's abused for economic protectionism. But I mean, losing the war pertaining to semiconductors, you have no control over the rare earth mineral, which you need for the magnets, which you need for the missiles. So that's gonna be very difficult to deal. Now, Section 301, which is of the Trade Act of 1974, it basically punishes unfair trade practices. Okay, so basically, China's tariffs on tech, electronic, machinery since 2018. I mean, the basically, the countries being the businesses in China are being subsidized by the Chinese government. And of course, some people are saying, well, that's what the U.S. is doing, for example, with by taking a 10% stake in Intel. Aren't you doing the same thing? Well, maybe sometime you have to do it. Hey, after all, the UK took control of their steel industry. I mean, you haven't heard anything about that. I mean, that's okay. The legal strength of Section 301 in terms of unfair trade practices is strong. It's explicit statute widely used under multiple administrations. But it's safe. So the chances are you're going to see more and more, and in fact you're already hearing it. You're hearing the little music, right, having to do with what they're doing with the semiconductors, and they're going to doing with the defense. The U.S. is looking to take position in actually defense industries. So that's a strategy. Then do it. So the U.S. but it's not like, we didn't realize. They know all this. They're trying, and they see what works, what doesn't work, creates confusion. I know, but we have no choice. We have no choice in this matter because China is slowly but surely becoming more important, and we are becoming extremely dependent on China. And that's not good. Trump says he's tough on China, but where does all this merchandise come from? Well, he's being tough on China because he's not negotiating. Right? He's waiting 90 days. Right? He doesn't care about the cheap merchandise that's coming from. You want to send as many sneakers and T-shirts or whatever. That's not what they're worried about. They're worried about is, where is my rare earth mineral? Well, you can't have it. China right now is restricting rare earth minerals. So he's saying, well, that's a problem. We have to do it. We need it. So I'm going to take over a few companies in the U.S. that make a rare earth mineral to support them, to help them. Well, but you're becoming like China now. You're taking over Intel. You're taking over some companies. You're going to take, I think they want to take over this huge defense, not take over, although 97% of the business comes from the U.S., it comes from the government, one of the defense contractors. Well, you can't do that. You're becoming like China. And you could see the articles coming out. The U.S. is becoming protectionist, like China, whatever. Well, that's what they're doing, and they got strong. So now the U.S. is trying to find a way to get this thing done. Of course, the way it's being done, unfortunately, is probably not the most nicest way to do it. But you have no time. You're running out of time. Chinese also supporting Africa on a very large scale. Yes. They're giving them money. Say, here, take it. Don't worry about it. Oh, by the way, I own everything now. Okay. Which is going to cut off France mineral rights, which France shares with the United States. We have a big problem. Yeah, you have to understand that these LR Banks is correct, and I like what Bill is saying as well. These things are very, very strategic being positioned. You need to be strategically positioned, because what's going to happen is you may end up all alone. Very, very, very. Now, the only thing China wants from the U.S. is really the consumer, you. We want you to keep buying from us. And I think the government says, yeah, but not anymore. That stops. That stops right now. Because what we realize is we are giving you the money. and you're using the money to get better at it and make it stronger. I know. I mean, that's why you became the king of the rare earth minerals, which nobody cared about it until they stopped giving it to you, and that's a problem. So now we don't want to give any more money. We want to have stuff to be made. That you have to understand what they're doing. It's based on there's a rationale, and it doesn't matter if even if the current president was elected, if the Democrats were in there, they would have to face the same problem. Now, would do anything about it? That's something else. Okay, maybe this administration is a little bit more pushy, coercive, annoying, but for the same purpose. You need to, in fact, all these countries want to make their country great again, and you have to keep doing that. Now, how far does this go? Well, is China looking for war? No, like China is not looking for war. China wants to do their thing, and then they're going to close the door, and that's it. And they're going to turn around, and they're going to do business with India, and they're going to do business with Russia, and that's it. And then they're going to close the door, and basically, that's it. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see lots, and that's what's happening right now. You're going to see lots of shaking hands and everybody getting along, everybody visiting each other, everybody dealing with each other, because India obviously is very dependent on China as well. Not as much, but it's happening. Of course, everybody says, well, the reason why India and Modi and the Chinese are getting closer and closer is because of the impact of the tariffs. Don't listen to that, because they've been talking for a while. They've been getting closer and closer since a while. So this is not a new. Let me tell you, for example, right in October 2024, India and China reached a critical agreement on border patrol arrangement. October 2024. Right, not yesterday. So that was way before the tariffs. Along the line of actual control. So basically, they're patrolling the area where they had problems, and now they're fine. Chinese foreign minister visited India in August, reinforcing this thought by restoring dialogue mechanism. In January of 2025, right, there was resumption of direct flights between each countries, and after almost 5 years. Now, January was before the tariffs. Now, obviously, they knew the tariffs were coming. Or again, these people are playing chess. They're playing chess, so this is important. Reconnected travelers and business exchanges. India is also easing business visa procedures for executives. Let's do business together. Cultural. This is not just a little agreement. Then the cultural and spiritual ties have been rekindled. I knew you was my friend. I forgot how great it was to be with you. In April 2025, India reopened a temple, the sacred pilgrimage to Tibet, strengthening shared spiritual heritage. Oh my God, we were brothers all along. We never realized how much we look alike, and we feel alike, and we think alike. More recently, there was the spiritual leader visited and renewed cultural exchanges. Then there's also Prime Minister Modi is set to visit. Right now it's happening. They are currently at the SCO summit in Tianjin in China, signaling elevated diplomatic. So they brought it up, and now they're coming together. China has opened up exports of rare earth minerals, magnets, fertilizer, and tunnel boring machines to India, easing critical supplies. I am helping you. I am helping you because you were my friend, and I totally forgot about you. I mean, this is what this channel is about. I'm trying to frame it for you, but you could see. Now, I'm not saying this is the best way of doing it. Maybe there was an easier way of doing it. I don't know if there was a faster way of doing it, though. But then again, if you go too fast, sometimes you fall. And obviously now the Supreme Court is going to say, whoa, stop it. Can't do that. I know you put me in that job, for life, but I can't agree because that's too much power. I stopped Biden, by the way, and you were happy about that, but I'm going to have to stop you. And I think they know that already. So now they're saying, you know what, we're going to shift away from these guys because that's going to be. Now, having said that, and that's what India has to really think about it. The U.S. is very reliant on the U.S. economy. In fact, right now, and I'll do a live on that a couple of days, but India is suffering. It's hurting. That 50%. And by the way, it's not moving. It's staying. India is suffering right now. The rupee has come down. Because 25% of the economy is I mean that they do a bunch of other things, but some of the things they have a huge. India is the U.S. is India's largest trading partner. Hey Joseph, India is the U.S. largest trading partners. 128 billion. Pharmaceutical, software, textile, machinery, right? So, and they're importing electronics and aircraft and things like that. India depends on the U.S. tech firms for cloud infrastructure, chips, big tech. They're probably trying to replace that with the Chinese. Now, of course, these are not friends, okay? They're not friends or enemies. They just have interests. It's the interest of the Chinese government to get closer to India. And obviously, they're saying, well, you're making it a lot easier for me because what you're doing with the tariffs. No. That started at the end of 2024. Okay. Now, maybe they knew what the current administration was going to do, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe that's what was happening, but that's exactly what they're doing, right? Education and immigration. The U.S. hosts about 260,000 Indian students. Now, it'd be great if everybody could get along, right? We could exchange, and that's what the U.S. was doing. I said, well, I don't mind. Just make the stuff for me, all right? You promise you send it to me, right? You promise. Yeah, okay. Well, here's the dollars. I don't need to make rare earth mineral. It's dirty. It's disgusting. Make sure you send me my rare earth minerals for my weapons. And it's saying, no, we don't do that anymore because if we end up having a war, right, I'm going to give you the magnets you're going to use to put in your missiles to hit me with. I don't want to do that. Now, you should know, for the sake of being correct, is that India does tariffs the U.S. quite a bit. I mean, there's a huge amount of tariffs, 39% agricultural tariffs on anything that the U.S. want to import to India. So they say, well, that's not fair, 39%. I can't send you my wheat. How do I do it? Well, you can't do it. I have to protect you. And I said, well, then that's not good. I'm talking to you, not listening. And on top of that, now you're buying 50% oil from Russia, and that's not good either. You have to understand that it's not about who's good, who's bad, right? There's no friends or foes. It's just interests. And India is in India's interest to keep 39% tax on agricultural goods because they need to protect their farmers. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? And it's in India's interest to buy oil from Russia because it's cheaper. Why wouldn't I buy it? And frankly, and they're right on that, a lot of people buy oil from Russia, including the European and including the U.S. Now, of course, it doesn't come directly from Russia, but it is Russian oil. In fact, I will do a video on that. Right? There's a lot of, it's not that simple. No, and this is what's annoying when you look at the newspapers and the news. They make it they make it so easy, like you're a child, right? And they're telling you all these things. Look, the Chinese and the Indians are getting together because of the administration, the 50% tariffs. What they don't tell you is that, but they started talking in October of last year, so it's not new. It's just that they've been discovered, and the administration said we got to stop that right now. I said, but you're going to lose them. I am losing them anyway. Okay, so we have to start moving faster. Again, the question is this the right way of doing it? Well, it is not, probably because we're going too fast, but it's taking too long. Carlton is saying that Russia is purchasing through using a specific shipping code that are not part of the U.S. sanction list. That's right. It's totally right. You got it. Well, I'm not buying Russian oil. I'm buying oil from from Bangladesh. Where is that coming from? It's coming from, the Philippines. And where's that? I don't know where it's coming from. Oil is oil, and that's come from Russia. So even the European, in fact, forget me, Modi himself said it. He says it's unfair for you to tell me that I'm using Russian oil when everybody else is using Russian oil, but they're not telling you or they're not tracking. It was this huge. I think I did a live on that. Right? They're doing something with the Iranian oil. So China is buying. Don't forget. China is not prevented, or either India. It's not illegal for them to buy oil from Russia. It's illegal for European and the Americans, because remember, 1994, when they voted when they actually they told the Ukrainian, okay, we're going to give you protection, security guarantees, get rid of all your weapons, and then we'll protect you in case you get invaded by anyone. And they never got security guarantees. So, the Russian, so that's where this thing started. And then obviously the way they responded is by saying, okay, we're not going to do any business with Russia, right? This is how we're going to respond. Now, can you maybe send some troops? No, we're not going to fight with Russia. I mean, that's not what we meant when we said security guarantees. We're going to cry, we're going to complain, we're going to sanction, but we're not going to fight with the Russians because, quite frankly, they're pretty formidable. The NATO secretary himself said it. It's a war economy. We cannot stop them. It's impossible. Okay, so that's why they say that you're not going to do it. You're not going to fight against. We're not going to buy oil from them. But China and Russia never said that. Can you talk about the SWIFT alternative by the BRICS for trading and impact on the US dollar? Exactly. That is a very important point as well, because what Biden said, and he weaponized the dollar. I mean, he did kind of what the U.S. administration did now with the tariffs. He said, okay, you know what? You do not get to use the dollar anymore. You do not get to use the SWIFT system, rightfully so, what Cotton is referring to. He's referring to the SWIFT. This is how money moves around. You may not be aware of it, but you may use it. You may not realize that you're using it, but that's how money moves around the world. They say you don't have access to this anymore. And the Russians said, and on top of that, all the money you ever see, we're taking that too. Really? Wow. Well, that's how we're complaining. We're saying no to the Ukraine invasion. So what did they do? Well, they went around. And they got closer with the BRICS people. Because in the past, you needed dollar to buy oil, the petrodollars. Now you don't need it anymore. So by weaponizing the dollar the way you did in SWIFT, you force them to get closer together. You could say that makes that same point. So, I mean, the administration, but the U.S., you shouldn't say that the administration, it's the U.S., right? The U.S. having this problem from before than now. They're just trying to find ways to work around it. It's just that these pieces are moving on their own, right? And maybe you weren't paying attention, and now you realize you have to pay attention. And with the SWIFT system, Russia is out. I think they're still eating, they're still drinking, they're still living, and they're able to do without it. So if Russia could do without it, maybe Russia could do without it, and maybe India at some point. So therefore, we don't need the SWIFT. You know what? We don't even need the dollar anymore. Because you have to understand that what they all want is the dollar. Why do they want the dollar? Because the dollar is a reserve currency. And you need a reserve currency to do anything in the world. If you want to buy stuff from some small company in Indonesia and you're living in Europe and you're sending your goods, like a chair, whatever, over to Indonesia, they're going to, hey, here's my rupee. I don't want the rupee. I don't know. You print it in your basement or whatever. I want dollars. So they need dollars because you need something that, it's a piece of paper at the end of the day, if you believe it, but except that it's full faith and credit U.S. government. That's a huge weapon that you have. The U.S. has a weapon, which is the dollar. Nobody can do anything without the dollar. You cannot trade. But if tomorrow they say, well, I don't need the dollar, maybe I use the euro. So when you want to get the rare earth minerals in the country, and you say, here's the dollar, and they say, I don't want the dollar. So what do you want? I don't know. What do you have? Because what's happening right now? What do you have for me? What are you going to give me? You're going to buy my shoes, my sneakers, and everything that I have? Are you going to buy that for me? Yeah, but, but then the more I buy the rare earth mineral from you, the better you get at it. And do you promise you're going to give it to me forever? Because if there's a war, I need it. It's a circle, it's and at the end of the day, you're in the middle of all this. You say, well, what does that all mean for me? It's important for you, right? Thanks to Nixon, they're no longer gold. Yeah, Carlton. You know what happened with that? And this administration is not the first one to use the hammer. Because after World War II, what happened is they decided, okay, we need a currency to make this world going because it's a big mess right now. Let's use the dollar since I won the war and I'm all and powerful. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the dollar as a currency. You cannot do business without the dollar in the entire world. But I'm going to back it up with gold. Right? So you could, anytime you want, so in case you don't trust a piece of paper, anytime you want, you exchange it for gold. And then the only thing is you need gold to back it up. You have to have lots amount of gold. So you're limiting the amount of paper you could print. So Nixon said, forget the gold. You don't need the gold to back it up anymore. I said, well, what are you doing? Stop. The whole thing's going to collapse. People may not want to use the dollar anymore because there's no gold backing it up. No, we do not need the gold because we are the dollar. We are almighty dollar. No joking. That's exactly what happened in 1970. I forgot the day. I think 1971. That was like the tariffs at those days, or the Biden with the not as strong as with Biden. The Biden thing wasn't as strong with the SWIFT thing, but it was pretty strong stuff at that time. And they thought, and you know what happened? It did not collapse. It worked out. People say, you know what? The U.S. is the best. I will use a dollar without gold backing it up. And that's when the U.S. just took off. Because now you could print as much money as you want. And I'm sure they saw ahead of time, well, we're going to borrow a lot of money here. Don't worry about it because you know what? You could print more money to pay for your own debt. Sky's the limit. And that's when the U.S. took off and became a superpower. Until the 2000, when hey Raymond, when it became a superpower, when China joined the World Trade Organization in 2000. I say, I want some of that too. Well, what do you have to bring to the table? You don't have the dollar. Well, I could make the cheap stuff for you. All right, here, go ahead. I could make it very cheaply. This is fantastic. So then the corporation in the U.S. decided to, well, let's send the stuff to over there, and I could save a lot of money. I don't have to spend my workers here. And then this whole thing started to move south. And, Raul says it's about time Africa to get in the money equation. Yeah, yes, of course. It would be nice if people start to get involved in the process, other countries. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but when you look at maps in the world, and Africa is actually unjustly, the size of Africa, like Greenland, is a lot smaller. It's, I think, 14 times smaller than the way it's being represented on maps. So when you look at maps and you see Africa, you say, oh, Africa is a much larger country. Unfortunately, it's a big mess. And they can't, they can't get their act together, unfortunately. But that could be a formidable place because they have lots of mineral, lots of things happening down there. But the point is, the U.S. now is on track to have the tariffs being nullified by the Supreme Court. that's going to be a huge black eye. I mean, they're going to turn it around and saying, well, you're against me and it's bipartisan, not bipartisan. It's the game is. But I think they know that. And I think they're already shifting the other way. I think they realize what's happening and that's what they're doing. And that's going to be, that could be a lot of damage at some point. So let's see what happens. I've got a bunch of new highlights coming up pretty soon. I want to make sure that you are all informed as to what's happening. I mean, that's important. It's important because I'm assuming the market is going to react positively, right? I'm assuming that it's going to be because the market is going to say, well, there's no inflation, things should look a lot better, so we should be good, right? Let's see. But there's a risk that if the market thinks it's not going to happen and then it's actually happening, then that could be a problem. But I'm not seeing it. I think the market is going to look at it in a way that is positive, I think. It could, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the good news is the market is strong. And in my membership, for my members, I give you lots of recommendation and in terms of, showing some of the stuff that I buy in the market right now, a lot of the small caps. The market is very high, it's doing great. I mean, what's gonna happen with the Fed in September? They're gonna say lower the rates, right? I mean, not that it's being pressured in any way, but I mean, if you look at the employment numbers, are pretty low. Right? Employment is not doing great. I will tell you right now. Although unemployment rate is not going any higher. Well, that's because a lot of people are not in the country anymore, because of the immigration situation. There's less people, less job is less people too. So unemployment rate at 4% is almost full employment, okay? Are you going to see some things going? You're going to see because they're telling you the inflation is going to come through and it's going to impact everything and it's going to be a problem. Well, I mean, the tariffs are impacting industrial goods, right? Well, real employment and unemployment is 7.8. Well, yeah, but what I mean by that is the numbers that they're looking at, right? Because that's what they're looking at, not the real number. They're looking at, Carlton is mentioning the real number. He's right. I mean, who knows what the real number is, right? The official number is 4%. And that's what they're looking at to make the decision on the rates which impacts you. So if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to buy a house, number should be coming down pretty soon. Should be pretty positive, I think. Okay. Take a look at my other lives coming up. Lots of interesting topics, I think. We're going to talk about what else is the U.S. doing going forward. What do you mean they're going after different type of tariffs? Yeah, they're changing their focus because they know this is not going to happen. We're going to talk about what's happening in India. They're in trouble. Obviously, they're meeting right now in China, but we'll find out more about that. Canada, for example, is starting to look at the Nordic countries. They are branching out to figure other ways than using the U.S. as a consumer. We shall see. Should be very interesting. Goodbye, everyone.